You stand on the edge of an ancient desert, the sun beating down on your skin. A warm wind whispers secrets across endless dunes. Close your eyes and imagine a bustling city, vibrant and alive, nestled deep within this very landscape. You hear the clamor of markets, the laughter of children, the steady hum of everyday life. Now open them to an impossible silence. What if this entire world, an entire civilization, vanished in one single night, swallowed whole by the very sand that surrounds you? This is not fiction. Across our world, hidden beneath shifting dunes, lie the remains of thriving urban centers, lost to an unimaginable force of nature. Tonight, we journey into the heart of these mysteries, exploring the desert cities devoured by sand overnight. We will uncover their stories, their secrets, and the dramatic events that erased them from the visible world. You stand now not just on the edge of a desert, but within its very breath. The sun, a molten disk above, casts no shadow long enough to offer true escape. Instead, you feel the subtle shifting beneath your feet, the faint tremor of something immense and alive. This is the stage upon which entire civilizations perform their grand dramas, only to have the curtain drawn by an unexpected, silent force. Imagine the vast, undulating landscape, not as a static backdrop, but as a living entity, constantly rearranging itself, patiently waiting. The desert is not merely sand and heat. It is a master sculptor, a tireless architect of both creation and destruction. You hear its voice in the incessant sighing of the wind, a sound that can lull you into a false sense of peace or heighten your awareness to an impending threat. This is the wind that carried the whispers of traders and travelers, and later, the first grains of sand that would spell doom for flourishing cities. It is a deceptive force, sometimes a gentle breeze, sometimes a gale strong enough to reshape mountains. For many of these lost cities, the end did not always arrive with a single dramatic cataclysm like a volcanic eruption or a tidal wave. Often, it was a slower, more insidious encroachment, a gradual tightening of nature's grip. Think of it as a tide, but a tide of dust and grit, relentlessly advancing, particle by particle, year after year. You might first notice the sand accumulating at the base of your city walls, a fine powder gathering in doorways, then small drifts forming in unused courtyards. It would be a nuisance, perhaps requiring constant sweeping, constant vigilance. But the desert has endless patience, and its resources are limitless. The true danger lay in the culmination of these smaller intrusions. Imagine a series of unusually strong sandstorms, not just one, but a relentless barrage whipping across the landscape for days, even weeks. You would watch from within your homes, the sky turn to a swirling ochre haze, the air thick with abrasive particles. The very act of breathing would become a struggle. And with each passing hour, the sand would pile higher against your outer defenses, then creep over them, filling streets and squares, burying the lower stories of buildings. Consider the people living in these communities. They were not naive. They understood the power of their environment. They built walls, dug canals, developed ingenious methods to survive and thrive in arid lands. But sometimes, even the most sophisticated adaptations were no match for the desert's overwhelming power. You might wake one morning after a particularly ferocious storm, to find your familiar surroundings utterly transformed. A street you walked yesterday could now be a steep dune. A neighbor's roof might be all that remains visible of their home. This is the essence of being swallowed overnight. It is not necessarily a sudden instantaneous gulp, but rather the dramatic final act of a long, slow siege. The desert, having gradually surrounded and weakened the city, then delivers the decisive blow, often through a prolonged period of intense wind and sand deposition. In one continuous deluge of sand, the city's infrastructure could be compromised beyond repair, its lifeblood choked, its access routes severed. The sheer volume of material moved by a sustained sandstorm is almost beyond comprehension. It can literally bury a house in a day, an entire district in a week. The silence that follows such an event is profound. You would no longer hear the morning prayers, the cries of street vendors, the clatter of artisans at work. Instead, there would be only the sound of the wind, now soft again, smoothing over the fresh burial mounds, erasing any lingering evidence of human endeavor. The desert reclaims its territory with a quiet dignity, but an unforgiving finality. These aren't just abstract stories. You can almost feel the grit on your tongue, the wind whipping at your clothes as we contemplate these lost worlds. Think of the sheer scale of human effort, the lives lived, the cultures forged, all meticulously constructed over generations, only to be undone by the simple, relentless forces of nature. The desert is a powerful metaphor for transience, a stark reminder of our own vulnerability, even in our most advanced forms. But how did these cities even come to be in such precarious locations? You might ask yourself, why build in a place so prone to natural disaster? The answer often lies in ancient climate patterns, in forgotten rivers and lush oases that once made these regions fertile and hospitable. What is now a desolate expanse may once have been a thriving landscape, supporting agriculture and trade routes. Over centuries, however, subtle shifts in climate, prolonged droughts, or changes in river courses could slowly turn a garden into a wasteland. The life-giving water receded, and the desert, ever present at the margins, began its slow, inevitable creep inwards. It is a sobering thought. You are standing in what was once a green valley, crisscrossed by irrigation channels, perhaps even a bustling river. Now only the endless dunes remain, whispering secrets of what lies beneath. The sand acts as both destroyer and preserver. While it suffocates and buries, it also protects. Beneath those layers of fine golden dust, entire structures, artifacts, and even human remains can be astonishingly well preserved, hidden from the ravages of time and further decay. The very act of burial becomes an unintentional form of conservation, a sealing off from the outside world. Imagine archaeologists working today sifting through these sands. They are not merely digging for ruins, they are excavating entire frozen moments in time. You can picture them, carefully brushing away layers of dust that have settled for hundreds, sometimes thousands of years, slowly revealing a mosaic floor, a pottery shard, a perfectly preserved wall painting. Each discovery is a voice from the deep past, a testament to the lives lived in these now vanished metropolises. The overture, as we call this segment, is about understanding this immense, silent power. It is about appreciating the desert not just as empty space, but as a dynamic geological engine, capable of burying cities whole. You must feel the raw force of it, the endlessness of the sand, the relentlessness of the wind, to truly grasp the magnitude of what happened here. These aren't just ruins, they are monuments to the desert's power, mausoleums built by nature itself. And it is this understanding that sets the stage for our journey. We will soon delve into specific examples, names whispered down through history, or sometimes, names only recently unearthed from the sandy tombs. You will hear tales of cities like Ubar, the Atlantis of the sands, a legendary trade hub in Oman, swallowed by dunes in what felt like a single devastating moment. Or the ancient city of Shaili, in Egypt's Siwa oasis, slowly consumed by sand and salt. Each has its own unique story, its own particular way in which the desert delivered its final, overwhelming blow. But before we embark on those specific expeditions, you need to feel the vastness, the stillness, the quiet menace of this environment. Let the wind carry the image of these countless grains of sand, each one a tiny chisel relentlessly reshaping the world. Let the heat remind you of the harsh conditions that tested human ingenuity to its limits. This is the desert, the silent witness, the ultimate architect of oblivion. It holds more stories than we can ever fully uncover, but we will try. We will listen to the whispers carried on its winds, and we will peel back the layers of time and sand. The stage is set. The actors, long departed, await their rediscovery beneath the vast, shifting curtain of the desert. And you, our listener, are now poised to step into this ancient sandy theater, ready to hear the tales of cities that disappeared into the void, swallowed by sand overnight. You stand now on the threshold of a revelation. You have imagined the desert as it is today, endless dunes, scorching sun, a landscape defined by its stark, unforgiving beauty. But what if I told you that the very sand beneath your feet, stretching to the horizon in every direction, once flowed with water? What if this desolate expanse was once a vibrant tapestry of life, sustained by arteries of ancient rivers and the steady pulse of rainfall? Imagine for a moment that the wind whipping past your ears carries not the grit of sand, but the scent of damp earth and verdant foliage. You close your eyes and listen, and instead of the mournful sigh of the desert, you hear the distant murmur of a flowing river, the rustling of reeds along its banks, perhaps even the chirping of birds nesting in the leafy branches of trees. This is not fantasy. This is history. For millennia, the Sahara, the Arabian Desert, and other great arid regions of our world have experienced dramatic climatic shifts. Periods of intense drought, like the one we witness today, have been punctuated by eras of surprising lushness. Scientists call these green Sahara periods, but the phenomenon was not exclusive to one continent. Across vast swathes of what we now know as barren wasteland, there once existed a delicate balance, a fleeting window of opportunity where life could thrive. You find yourself transported back in time, perhaps 5,000 years ago or even 7,000. The air is cooler, laden with moisture. You walk not on soft, yielding sand but on firm, fertile ground. Look around you. The landscape is not flat and uniform, but sculpted by the meandering paths of rivers that snake their way across the plains, fed by seasonal rains or distant mountain meltwaters. These were not always mighty Amazonian giants, but they were vital. They were the lifeblood. Along these waterways, an astonishing transformation took place. Grasses grew tall, providing fodder for grazing animals. Clusters of acacia and palm trees offered shade and sustenance. The presence of water drew wildlife. Gazelles, wild asses, even larger beasts like elephants and rhinos, whose bones are sometimes unearthed from beneath the sand, stark reminders of a very different past. And where there was water and where there was prey, there were people. You see the first signs of human habitation. Simple camps evolve into more permanent settlements, strategically positioned along the riverbanks or beside the precious freshwater springs that bubbled up from subterranean aquifers. The people who lived here were not merely surviving, they were flourishing. They learned to harness the flow of the rivers, to dig wells, to cultivate crops in the surprisingly rich alluvial soil. They developed sophisticated irrigation techniques, channeling water to fields of millet, wheat, or barley, transforming patches of green into oases of civilization. Picture a settlement growing before your eyes. Simple dwellings of mud brick or stone rise from the earth, clustered together for mutual protection and community. You hear the chatter of voices, the clang of tools, the laughter of children playing by the water's edge. The aroma of cooking fires mingles with the scent of blooming plants. This is not the stark isolation of the modern desert. This is a thriving, bustling community, deeply connected to the rhythm of its river. The river was more than just a source of water for drinking and farming. It was a highway, a conduit for trade and communication. Boats laden with goods traversed its waters, connecting distant settlements. Along its banks, markets sprang up, exchanging agricultural produce for crafted tools, pottery, and exotic materials brought from faraway lands. These were early urban centers, not on the scale of Rome or Babylon perhaps, but significant hubs of culture and commerce in their own right. You might imagine these early inhabitants as simple desert dwellers, but that would be a mistake. They were ingenious, adaptable, and deeply attuned to their environment. They understood the subtle signs of the seasons, the behavior of the animals, and the temperamental nature of their life-giving waters. Their cultures developed rich mythologies and spiritual practices, often centered around the sacred element of water itself. Their art, etched into rock faces or molded in clay, depicted scenes of hunting, daily life, and the abundance of their green world. Now let your gaze wander beyond the immediate settlement. You see the intricate network of canals, some still visible as faint depressions in the sand when viewed from above, ghost lines on the landscape. These were the arteries of their agricultural prowess, carefully engineered to maximize every precious drop. Gardens bloomed where only sand exists today, orchards of date palms swayed in a gentle breeze, providing shade and sweet fruit. Livestock grazed in pastures that have long since been reclaimed by the dunes. This era of relative abundance fostered not just survival, but societal complexity. As communities grew, so did their needs. They built public structures, perhaps small temples or gathering places. They developed social hierarchies, with leaders, artisans, and farmers each playing their part in the intricate web of community life. They buried their dead with care, leaving behind pottery, tools, and sometimes even jewelry, silent testimonies to their lives and beliefs. But the very prosperity these settlements enjoyed was predicated on a fragile foundation: the sustained presence of water. This mirage of green was in fact an illusion of permanence. The climate, as it always does, began to shift once more. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the rains became less frequent. The rivers, once robust and steady, began to thin, their flow weakening. The springs that fed their wells started to dwindle. You can almost feel the anxiety in the air as the changes become undeniable. The growing season shortens. Crop yields decline. The grazing lands shrink, and the animals that once roamed freely begin to disappear, driven away by thirst and hunger. The bustling markets grow quieter. The laughter by the riverbanks becomes less frequent, replaced by hushed conversations and worried glances towards the ever-brightening, ever-emptying sky. The people, accustomed to abundance, faced an unprecedented challenge. They dug deeper wells, extending their reach further into the earth, desperate to tap into the dwindling reserves. They migrated upstream, hoping to find more reliable sources closer to the mountains. Some left altogether, seeking greener pastures elsewhere, their departures leaving behind a trail of abandoned homes and fields. But many remained. Perhaps they were too deeply rooted, too invested in their homes and heritage. Perhaps they simply had nowhere else to go. They clung to the hope that the rains would return, that the rivers would swell once more, that the cycle of life would reset itself. They adapted as best they could, conserving every drop, rationing their dwindling resources, praying for a change that would never come. The mirage of green slowly faded, giving way to the harsh reality of the encroaching desert. The fertile soils dried up, turning to dust. The vegetation withered and died, leaving the land exposed and vulnerable. The rivers, once mighty arteries of life, became trickles, then seasonal wadis, then nothing more than dry depressions in the earth, memories of water carved into the landscape. You watch as the wind, a relentless sculptor, begins its work. Without the protective cover of plants, the topsoil is easily lifted and carried away. Sand, once held at bay by water and vegetation, begins its slow, inexorable march. It creeps into fields, covers pathways, drifts against the walls of homes, an endless, golden tide. It is here, in this agonizing transition from vibrant life to desolate stillness, that these cities faced their ultimate test. They were not swallowed by sand in a single, cataclysmic event, not always. More often, it was a prolonged, agonizing siege, a slow strangulation. The land that had sustained them for centuries now turned against them, reclaiming its arid nature, erasing the green illusion. The people, facing starvation and thirst, were forced to make impossible choices. To stay meant certain death. To leave meant abandoning everything they had built, everything they knew. You can almost hear the heartbreaking goodbyes, the mournful silence that fell over empty villages, the final desperate footsteps leading away from what was once home. And then silence. The structures, once teeming with life, stood empty, slowly succumbing to the elements. Sand-filled courtyards, choked doorways, buried foundations. The wind whistled through empty windows, carrying not the sounds of human life, but the whisper of the desert reclaiming its own. Over generations, the very memory of these green lands, of the rivers that once flowed, of the vibrant cities that thrived, began to fade from human consciousness. They became legends, myths, cautionary tales. The desert, the ultimate architect of oblivion, erased their physical presence and began to erase their story. But the desert also preserves. Beneath those shifting sands, beneath the layers of time and dust, lie the silent testimonies of these lost worlds. The remnants of ancient irrigation systems, the foundations of houses, the tools, the pottery, the bones of people and animals, they are all there, waiting. They speak of a time when the desert was green, when rivers ran, and when human ingenuity carved out a vibrant existence against the odds. It is to these buried whispers that we now turn our attention, to uncover the specific tales of cities that defied the desert for a time, only to be swallowed by its relentless embrace. You have seen the mirage, felt the green illusion. Now you are ready to explore the specific places where that illusion ultimately shattered. You stand at the edge of what was once a bustling settlement, not a grand imperial capital, but a testament to human will etched into the very fabric of the desert. The illusion of green has vanished, replaced by the stark reality of wind-scoured stone and sun-baked earth. Yet, within this landscape, life did not merely cling on. It flourished, carved out by generations who understood the desert's unforgiving rhythm. These were the architects of dust, building not with marble, but with the very soil beneath their feet, shaping existence from the scarcity around them. Imagine yourself here, not in the ruins, but in the vibrant heart of its ancient days. The sun beats down with an intensity that seems to press the air itself flat, yet the narrow streets offer slivers of shade, carved deliberately by the ingenuity of ancient town planners. You feel the grit of fine sand under your sandals, a constant reminder of the desert's presence, even within the city walls. The air is dry, carrying the faint scent of baking bread, sun-warmed clay, and the distant earthy smell of irrigated fields. Survival here revolved around one precious commodity: water. Without it, the city was nothing more than a temporary mirage. You walk towards the sound of rhythmic creaking, a wellhead, perhaps, where donkeys patiently circle, drawing precious liquid from deep underground aquifers. Or perhaps you follow a subtle incline in the ground, tracing the path of a cannet, an ancient underground aqueduct, a marvel of engineering. This subterranean tunnel, sometimes stretching for miles, taps into water sources in distant foothills, bringing life-sustaining moisture directly into the heart of the settlement. The entrance to such a system is often marked by a series of access shafts, appearing like watchful eyes across the landscape, carefully maintained to ensure the flow continues uninterrupted. The water itself, when it finally emerges into open channels within the city, is revered. It nourishes the small enclosed gardens, fills the communal cisterns and sustains every living thing. You witness the careful distribution of this lifeblood. Every drop counts. Families would have their allocated times, their specific channels to divert water to their homes or small plots. The community's very fabric was woven around the management of this shared resource. Disputes over water were rare but fierce, for to control the water was to control life itself. From the common well, where women gathered to draw water and share the day's news, to the elaborate systems that brought water to public baths and even simple fountains, water was the heartbeat of these desert cities. It was not merely a utility, it was a sacred trust, passed down through generations. With water came the possibility of sustenance. Venture beyond the immediate confines of the mud brick homes, and you would find the irrigated fields, a green tapestry against the ochre landscape. Date palms, their fronds rustling softly in the desert breeze, provided shade, fruit and building materials. Beneath their canopy, protected from the harshest sun, grew figs, pomegranates and essential grains like barley and wheat. You might see farmers diligently working the soil, their movements practiced and efficient, knowing that every seed, every sprout, was a defiance against the arid wilderness. Their tools were simple, but their knowledge of the land, of the timing of the seasons, and of water conservation was profound. These were not just fields, they were carefully cultivated oases, each a small miracle born of human effort and ingenuity. The very architecture of these cities speaks of adaptation and resilience. You find yourself walking through labyrinths of homes built from sun-dried mud brick. These aren't flimsy structures. Their walls are thick, often over a meter wide, designed to insulate against the scorching daytime heat and the surprising chill of desert nights. Small, high windows minimize heat gain, while inner courtyards provide private, shaded sanctuaries, often with a small tree or a shallow pool of water, creating a microclimate of coolness. The roofs, typically flat, served as additional living space during cooler evenings, offering views of the vast, star-dusted desert sky. The streets themselves are narrow, winding purposefully, creating self-shading canyons that offer refuge from the relentless sun. Public spaces, like the bustling market square, might have awnings or even strategically planted trees to provide relief. You hear the chatter of merchants, the braying of donkeys laden with goods, the rhythmic clanging of a blacksmith. Despite the harsh environment, life here was vibrant, a testament to collective human enterprise. Trade routes, often stretching for hundreds of miles across treacherous terrain, connected these cities, bringing in exotic goods, ideas, and news from the wider world. These were not isolated outposts but vital hubs, their existence driven by strategic location, the presence of a precious resource, or a crucial link in a commercial network. The social structure was tightly knit, a necessity for survival in such an environment. Cooperation was not merely a virtue, it was a prerequisite. Families, clans, and entire communities worked together, maintaining the vital irrigation systems, defending against raiding parties, and sharing the burdens and bounties of life. Festivals and celebrations, often tied to the harvest or the rare arrival of rain, provided moments of collective joy and strengthened community bonds. Even death was intertwined with the land. Graves were often dug into the very earth that sustained them, a final return to the dust from which they built their lives. Yet, underlying all this ingenuity and vibrant life was a constant awareness of the desert's power. It was not a distant threat, but a relentless neighbor always encroaching. You see the evidence of this struggle in the accumulating sand at the base of walls, the way dust settles on everything, subtly altering textures and colors. Sandstorms, when they struck, were not just inconvenient. They were terrifying forces of nature, capable of burying homes, choking wells, and reshaping the landscape overnight. The people learned to read the sky, to feel the shift in the wind, anticipating these colossal events and seeking shelter, hoping their city would emerge intact. These were people who lived with an intimate knowledge of their environment, recognizing its beauty and its brutality in equal measure. They were not naive to the desert's potential for destruction, but they faced it with a determined spirit, believing in their ability to endure. They built their homes, their temples, their lives, knowing that permanence was an illusion, but striving for it nonetheless. Their legacy is not just in the ruins we find, but in the sheer audacity of their existence, the courage to sculpt life from dust and desolation. You see it now not as a broken place, but as a place where life was fiercely, painstakingly constructed. The walls you touch, the foundations you trace, were not just structures. They were acts of defiance, monuments to ingenuity, and the silent witnesses to a way of life that danced on the edge of the possible. They were the cities where dust was both the enemy and the very medium of their being. And for centuries, sometimes even a millennium, they held their ground, until the balance finally, irrevocably shifted. That shift, when it came, was not always a singular, cataclysmic event. Sometimes it was a slow, insidious creep, like a tide of sand gaining inches each year, a relentless, patient siege. But other times, it was a sudden, furious declaration from the desert itself, a monumental gasp that swallowed entire worlds in its dusty maw. You stand here now, feeling the insistent tug of the wind, and you can almost hear the whispered warnings of those who lived through that turning point. Imagine yourself in one of those ancient desert cities, a place that had defied the odds for centuries. You wake one morning perhaps to a subtle change in the air. The usual invigorating breeze feels heavier, laden with an almost imperceptible dust. The sky, once a brilliant, unending blue, now carries a faint ochre tint on the horizon. It is a minor detail easily dismissed, but it is the first tremor of a coming earthquake. Days turn into weeks. The wind picks up, not violently at first, but with a persistent, nagging presence. You find yourself sweeping more often, a fine layer of sand accumulating on every surface inside your home within the marketplace. Your children learn to tie scarves tighter, to shield their eyes from the ever-present grit. The well, which once offered a steady, cool stream, now seems to yield its precious water with a little more reluctance, its level visibly dropping. The plants you tend, once robust and green, begin to droop, their leaves dusted with a deathly pallor. The desert, which you once saw as a challenging but predictable neighbor, begins to feel like a living, breathing entity, slowly closing its grasp. The dunes on the city's outskirts, once held at bay by diligent work and protective walls, seem to inch closer, their golden backs humping higher with each passing storm. The horizon, once a distant line of freedom, starts to shrink, compressed by the encroaching landform. You begin to notice a shift in the light, a perpetual haze that dims the sun, painting everything in shades of muted brown and rust. Then the true storms begin. Not the everyday squalls that locals knew how to weather, but something far more menacing. Imagine a day when the sky itself seems to collapse. You hear it before you see it, a low, guttural roar on the horizon, growing louder, more urgent. It is the sound of millions upon millions of sand grains, lifted by a furious, unseen hand, hurtling towards your city. You rush inside, shutters slammed, doors barred. But no human construction can fully repel this force. The air turns thick and dark, plunging the city into an unnatural twilight, then an oppressive night, even in the middle of the day. Sand finds its way through every crack, every crevice, coating your tongue, filling your nose, burning your eyes. You huddle with your family, the roar of the wind and sand a constant, deafening presence outside, the very walls of your home vibrating with the assault. Hours pass, or perhaps a full day and night. You lose all sense of time in the terrifying blackness. When the wind finally begins to relent, when a sliver of weak, dust-filtered light finally pierces the gloom, you emerge to a transformed world. The familiar streets are gone, buried under drifts of sand several feet high. What was once the bustling entrance to the market is now a gentle slope of golden dust. The smaller homes, the workshops, are mere mounds, their roofs just visible or perhaps swallowed entirely. You gaze at the temple spire, once a proud beacon, now reduced in height, its intricate carvings partially obliterated by a cruel new veneer of sand. It is as if the desert has swept a colossal broom across your world, erasing much of what was there. This was not a one-time event. For many of these cities, it was a cycle. They would clear the sand, rebuild, and for a time life would resume. But each successive storm was a little worse, each effort at reclamation a little more exhausting. The resources dwindled. The spirit waned. The constant struggle became too much to bear. Consider the city of Ubar, the Atlantis of the sands, lost for millennia until its rediscovery in the 1990s. Legend spoke of its immense wealth, its towering pillars, its sudden disappearance. While not swallowed overnight in a single storm, its end was likely the culmination of a devastating, rapid environmental shift. Its crucial water source, a massive limestone aquifer, collapsed. Without water, the city was doomed. As its inhabitants fled, the wind and sand moved in with brutal efficiency, reclaiming what had been carved from its heart. Think too of cities along the ancient Silk Road, trading hubs like Miran or Khoran, nestled in the Darim Basin. These were not just settlements. They were vital arteries of global commerce and culture. But shifts in climate, the drying up of rivers fed by distant mountains, and the relentless march of the Taklamakan Desert meant their lifelines withered. Sandstorms, often described as black storms because of the sheer density of dust, would engulf these oases for days. When the storms lifted, roads were obliterated, fields buried, and homes inundated. The overnight burial might not have been a single night for the entire city, but for individual homes and pathways, it absolutely was. A house could be perfectly functional one evening and by dawn, its doors and windows utterly choked with sand, rendering it unusable, uninhabitable. For those who lived through these events, the feeling must have been one of profound helplessness. Imagine the agonizing decision: to stay and continue the increasingly futile battle, or to abandon everything you knew, your ancestors' homes, your heritage, and become a refugee, seeking a new life in a less hostile place. Entire populations had to choose. And for many, the choice was made for them by the desert itself. The desert is a crucible. It forces civilizations to adapt, to innovate, to build with resilience, but it also relentlessly tests their limits. It exposes the fragility of human endeavor against the immense, indifferent power of nature. When a city was finally abandoned, it wasn't just left to decay, it was actively consumed. The winds, no longer deterred by human activity, would carry fresh waves of sand year after year, slowly filling every room, every courtyard, until the very shape of the buildings blurred beneath vast, undulating dunes. These forgotten cities, now just echoes beneath the sand, tell a story not only of destruction but of the incredible tenacity of human spirit. They remind us that even the most enduring monuments are transient, and that the greatest empires can be humbled by the shifting sands of time and climate. They stand as silent warnings, monuments to a balance that was not maintained, to the power of a landscape to reclaim what was once its own. You walk over these buried cities, your feet treading on the very roofs of forgotten homes, and you feel the weight of those vanished lives pressing up through the sand. You hear the final whisper of a forgotten name, carried on the very wind that buried it. You feel the grains of sand shift beneath your feet, a constant, almost imperceptible tremor that speaks of endless movement. It is this very movement, this slow, deliberate dance of the desert, that writes the final chapters for so many human settlements. We often imagine abandonment as a gradual process, a slow decay over centuries. But for many desert cities, the end came with a suddenness that defied belief, a relentless surge of nature that seemed to swallow entire communities overnight. Imagine standing at the edge of one such city, not in its final days but in its twilight. The wind, ever present, is now more than a companion. It is an architect of destruction. It whispers through the narrow alleys, a low, sibilant sound, carrying with it the very substance that will undo this place. You watch as small drifts form against the base of a wall, innocent at first, no more than a nuisance for the city dwellers who sweep them away each morning. But these are the harbingers, the advance guard of a force that will not be swept aside. The veil begins to descend almost without warning. Perhaps it starts with a season of unusual winds, a sustained fury that whips the desert floor into a frenzy. The sky itself seems to darken, not with rain clouds, but with a thick, choking haze of pulverized earth. You can taste the grit on your tongue, feel it coating your eyelashes, finding its way into every crevice. Visibility drops to mere feet. The familiar contours of your home, the marketplace, the towering minaret, all blur into indistinct shapes, ghost-like against the swirling backdrop. This is not a gentle snow falling. This is a living, breathing entity, a massive, unyielding wave of granular stone. It seeks out every opening, every crack, every unprotected space. Through open doorways, it pours in, a silent, golden cascade, burying furniture, filling bowls, transforming living rooms into miniature dun escapes. Windows, once sources of light, become barricades against the encroaching tide, their glass etched and scoured by the abrasive assault. The speed of this transformation is terrifying. What took builders years to erect can be undone in days, sometimes even hours, during the peak of a colossal sandstorm. You wake one morning, your throat dry, your ears still ringing from the night's howling gale, to find your courtyard filled almost to the height of your chest. The doorway you used yesterday is now just a narrow archway in a wall of sand. The street outside, once a bustling artery, is an impassable ridge, its paving stones miles beneath a new, undulating landscape. Consider the city of Ubar, the legendary Atlantis of the sands, said to have been swallowed by the desert. While the precise details of its demise remain debated, the core truth persists. Opulent cities, built with immense effort, can simply vanish. They do not crumble slowly like European ruins. They are interred, preserved in an alien tomb, their upper levels becoming the very foundations for the next layer of sand, then the next. You might try to fight it, of course. You and your neighbors, armed with shovels and determination, could attempt to clear the accumulating sand. For a time, perhaps you would succeed, pushing back the edges of the encroaching desert. But the sand is endless and human energy is not. The wind does not tire. It returns day after day, year after year, with its tireless payload. It is a siege you cannot win. The homes nearest the city's edge are the first to be abandoned. Their residents, weary and defeated, gather what they can carry and retreat further into the city's heart, hoping for a reprieve that never truly comes. Then those homes, left vacant, become funnels for the sand, accelerating the process. The desert claims them not just with a gentle covering, but by filling them from floor to ceiling, pressurizing the structures, until the roofs creak and groan, then finally collapse under the sheer, unyielding weight. The very infrastructure of the city begins to fail. Roads become unusable. Water channels clog. The flow of commerce, the lifeblood of any urban center, is choked by the relentless grit. The effort required just to maintain basic functionality becomes too great. Eventually, the choice is no longer whether to stay or go, but when to depart. As the city empties, the process accelerates further. There are no more hands to sweep, no more eyes to watch for the creeping dunes. The desert moves in with a final, decisive sweep. It is not always a sudden catastrophic event, but often a series of increasingly severe sandstorms, each one adding another foot or two to the rising tide. One season the city stands, albeit struggling. The next it is half buried. A few seasons after that, only the highest points remain visible, like islands in an ocean of sand. And then one morning, perhaps after a particularly brutal week of winds, you return to where the city once stood, hoping to salvage a memory, a lost artifact. But there is nothing. Just a vast, unbroken expanse of dunes, smoothed by the wind, looking as if no human foot had ever disturbed its surface. The very existence of the city is erased from the visible landscape, its memory relegated to legend and fading oral traditions. This is the power of the shifting veil, nature's relentless march. It reminds us that our structures, however grand, are ephemeral against the forces of geology and climate. The desert is not just an empty space, it is an active, dynamic ecosystem with its own rhythms and imperatives. When human habitation disrupts those rhythms, or when the climate itself shifts, the desert responds. It reclaims. These swallowed cities are not merely archaeological curiosities. They are stark reminders of a delicate balance. Many of these ancient urban centers flourished during periods of more favorable climate, when their regions were not as arid. A subtle but profound shift in rainfall patterns, a prolonged drought, or a change in wind direction could tip the scales irreversibly. Human activity, such as extensive irrigation that depleted aquifers or cleared stabilizing vegetation, often exacerbated these natural tendencies, making cities even more vulnerable to the desert's embrace. You stand on the crest of a dune, feeling the cool desert air on your skin. Below you, unseen but ever present, lies a city. It is not merely buried, it is entombed, a perfect preservation of a moment in time, frozen beneath layers of sand that act as both destroyer and protector. The very sand that obliterated it also safeguards its secrets, waiting for some future whisper of wind, or perhaps the curious hands of archaeologists, to reveal them once more. The relentlessness of this process is humbling. It demonstrates that the earth itself is a living, breathing entity, constantly reshaping its surface. Our cities, our monuments, are mere fleeting gestures upon that vast canvas. We build with stone and brick, with grand visions of permanence. But the desert builds with sand and wind, with impatience that spans millennia, and its structures, though constantly moving, possess an enduring power that ours can never truly match. It is a profound lesson in perspective. Our human timeline is but a blink in the desert's gaze. The sand moves, grains colliding and settling, driven by forces far beyond our control. It is a slow, methodical erasure, yet one that can culminate in a swift, dramatic act of engulfment. The veil shifts, covers, and hides, leaving behind only the vast, silent expanse of the desert, where echoes of vanished lives are carried on every gust of wind, a constant reminder of nature's ultimate triumph. You feel the wind pick up again, a dry rustle across the endless expanse. You turn your face into it, feeling the tiny impact of countless grains. You understand now that the desert is not static. It is alive, moving, always on the march, and it has claimed its territory time and time again, with an authority that leaves no room for argument. Its methods may be quiet, but its results are absolute. The desert's authority, though often quiet and methodical, can also manifest in a terrifying, explosive burst of power. Sometimes, its results are not merely absolute in the long run, but shockingly immediate. Imagine, if you will, a city thriving at the desert's edge, a vibrant tapestry of lives interwoven with trade, laughter, and the steady rhythm of daily existence. You stand on a rooftop as the sun begins its descent, painting the western sky in hues of orange and deep violet, casting long shadows across the bustling marketplace below. The air, though warm, carries a faint scent of dust, a common aroma in these lands, usually benign, a familiar companion. But tonight something is different. The wind, which previously felt like a gentle breath, now stirs with an unsettling energy. It whistles through the narrow alleys, a low, mournful sound that seems to speak of an impending shift. You watch as the distant horizon, typically a sharp line separating earth from sky, begins to blur. A faint haze rises, barely perceptible at first, like a distant whisper growing louder. The sky darkens with unusual speed, not just with the setting sun, but with something else entirely. You feel a subtle tremor beneath your feet, not an earthquake but a deep resonance from the land itself, as if the desert is clearing its throat. The scent of dust intensifies, becoming gritty on your tongue, filling your nostrils. People in the streets below quicken their pace, their conversations dying down, replaced by a growing murmur of apprehension. Merchants hurriedly secure their stalls, pulling canvas covers tight, their faces etched with a dawning worry. They know this feeling, this particular atmospheric pressure, this strange stillness that precedes the storm. This is not just any wind. This is the breath of something ancient, something hungry. The sun vanishes, not with a gentle fade, but as if swallowed whole by the rapidly encroaching gloom. The haze on the horizon is no longer faint. It is a towering wall, an immense, roiling cloud of fine reddish-brown particles, advancing with an unnatural swiftness. You hear the first distinct roar now, not of thunder, but of millions upon millions of sand grains, lifted and propelled by an invisible, ferocious force. It is the sound of the desert itself rising up, turning into a liquid, destructive wave. Panic ripples through the city. Shouts erupt, frantic calls for loved ones, the clatter of hastily shut doors and windows. You scramble down from the rooftop, the wind now a physical presence, pushing against you, trying to tear your clothes from your body. Sand, like 1,000 tiny needles, whips at your skin, stings your eyes. You pull your cloak tighter, instinctively trying to shield yourself, but it is a futile gesture against this elemental assault. You try to find shelter, pushing your way through the chaos of the streets. The air grows thick, visibility plummeting from yards to mere feet, then to inches. The world is reduced to a swirling, suffocating maelstrom of red and brown. Each breath is an effort, the air heavy with abrasive particles. The roar is deafening now, a continuous, overwhelming din that drowns out all other sounds. The cries of people, the creaking of timber, the shattering of pottery. All swallowed by the voice of the storm. You press yourself against a solid stone wall, feeling the vibrations of its struggle against the onslaught. You can feel the sand piling up around your feet, swiftly rising, an inexorable tide. It creeps up your ankles, then your knees, pressing against your body with an astonishing weight. This is not merely wind-blown dust. This is a solid, advancing mass. It is as if the very ground beneath you is rising, or rather, that the sky above you is falling, bringing the desert down upon the city. The lights in the houses flicker, then die one by one as windows shatter and lamps are extinguished by the sudden influx of sand. The city, moments ago a beacon of life, is being systematically consumed by an overwhelming darkness. The immense pressure of the sand begins to tell. You hear groans and cracks from nearby structures. Beams splinter. Roof tiles cascade down, not hitting the ground, but sinking into the rapidly accumulating dunes that are forming within the very streets. You realize with a chilling clarity that this is not a storm you can simply weather. This is an engulfment. This is the desert reclaiming its own, not in a slow, centuries-long erosion, but in a single catastrophic night. You hear a terrifying crunch, a sound of massive timbers giving way, followed by a dull thud. A building collapses nearby, not with a dramatic crash, but with a choked, muffled groan, as if it is being slowly, deliberately squeezed out of existence. Its collapse is absorbed by the surrounding sand, becoming merely a deeper ripple in the overall roar of the storm. The silence is the most terrifying part. It does not come abruptly. It creeps in, slowly, insidiously. As the city is buried, as the sand fills every crevice, every alleyway, every room, the sounds of destruction begin to fade. The wind's howl, once piercing, becomes muted, then a low rumble as its force is blunted by the very mass it has deposited. The grinding of sand against stone and wood diminishes. The frantic cries of trapped animals, the last desperate human shouts, are choked off, one by one. You are surrounded by an oppressive, heavy stillness. The sand has risen above your head, pressing in on all sides, the air thin and cold. You are not just observing this, you are experiencing the claustrophobia, the absolute finality of being buried alive by the desert itself. The pressure is immense, a solid blanket of earth. You can feel the vibrations, the slight shifts, as the sand settles into its new, permanent form around you. Then there is nothing. Just the profound, absolute silence of a world transformed. The furious, cacophonous night yields to an unimaginable stillness. The desert has arrived, completely, totally, and without remorse. What was once a vibrant city, a nexus of human endeavor, a place where stories were born and lives were lived, is now indistinguishable from the dune fields that stretch for countless miles in every direction. The sun rises the next morning, but you are not there to see it. If you were a distant observer, you would see a landscape utterly changed. No trace of the city remains. No rooftops, no minarets, no walls. Just rolling hills of pristine, untouched sand, sparkling faintly in the dawn light. The wind, now a gentle breeze, carries no echoes of laughter or sorrow. It whispers only of endless expanse, of secrets kept, of histories erased. The desert has swallowed it whole. It picked up the city, absorbed it, and then smoothed over the grave with a meticulous, unwavering hand. This is the power that lies latent in the seemingly empty spaces of the world. This is the fury that can erupt without warning, turning the familiar into the utterly alien, the present into the deep past in a single terrifying night. And then it is quiet. Profoundly, enduringly quiet. You realize that this is not just a geological process, a slow creep of sand over time. This is an event, a cataclysm, a deliberate act of erasure performed by the desert itself. It teaches a brutal lesson about permanence, about our perceived dominion over nature. We build, we toil, we create, believing our structures will stand for generations. But the desert has a different timeline, a different will. It has witnessed countless civilizations rise and fall, and it stands ready to reclaim them all. The sheer scale of this transformation from bustling life to utter non-existence, in the space of a few hours, is difficult to grasp. It speaks to a raw, untamed force that modern cities, with their steel and concrete, their intricate networks of power and communication, seem utterly vulnerable against. Imagine the fragility of it all, the delicate balance of human existence constantly challenged by such immense natural power. This is not a force that can be reasoned with or engineered around, or even truly predicted with absolute certainty. It is simply there, a sleeping giant capable of waking with terrifying speed and decisiveness. The suddenness of the silence, after the crescendo of fury, leaves an indelible mark. It is the sound of an entire world being snuffed out, not gradually but in an instant. The air, once filled with the clamor of life, then the roar of destruction, becomes utterly still, a vacuum of sound where only the memory of what was can exist. Even that memory is quickly eroded, subsumed by the new landscape. The desert offers no mourning, no markers, no remnants. Just the smooth, unbroken surface of newly deposited sand, a fresh canvas for eternity. This is the desert's final absolute word. You stand now not on that smooth, unbroken surface but deep beneath it. Imagine the weight, the sheer tonnage of sand pressing down from above. This is not merely a blanket thrown over a forgotten village. This is a deliberate geological act of burial, a slow, patient entombment orchestrated by the wind and the grains of eternity. You feel the grit, the dense compaction of countless particles, each one a minuscule fragment of time, now fused into a suffocating mass. The air around you, once alive with the city's hum, is now utterly still, heavy with the absence of sound, the very atmosphere a thick, granular silence. The city you once walked through, vibrant and alive, is gone. Not dissolved, not shattered by an earthquake, but swallowed whole, held in a silent, suffocating embrace. Picture the moment the first waves of sand began their assault. It was not a gentle drift, but a furious, almost liquid rush. The wind, a sculptor of the desert, also acts as its gravedigger, piling up dunes with relentless, indifferent force. You would have felt it first, the subtle sifting, the fine dust creeping under doors, coating every surface. It infiltrated everything, a fine, abrasive powder finding its way into your hair, onto your tongue, into the very fibers of your clothing. Then the drifts would have grown, creeping up walls, filling alleys, reaching for the rooftops like greedy, grasping fingers, steadily consuming the lower levels of every structure. Overnight, perhaps, the process was accelerated by an extraordinary storm. Imagine a sandstorm of such magnitude, a meteorological event of such ferocity, that the very air became an opaque, abrasive wall. Visibility drops to zero. The roar is deafening, 1,000 tearing sounds combined, a sound that vibrates through your bones, a monstrous cacophony of nature's fury. You can feel the impact of the grains like tiny projectiles, stinging your exposed skin, finding their way into every crease and fold, into your eyes and mouth. The world outside disappears, replaced by a swirling, chaotic void of brown and ochre, a suffocating blanket of moving earth that descends from the sky itself. Inside your home, you might have sealed the windows, stuffed cloths under doors, but the sand is insidious. It finds a way. It piles against the outer walls, forming impenetrable ramparts, then breaching the weaker points. Perhaps a window shatters under the unbearable pressure, or a doorway gives way with a groan and a crash, and suddenly, a deluge of sand pours in, an unstoppable river of grit filling rooms in mere minutes. You would have scrambled, fighting against it, perhaps attempting to climb to find higher ground, but imagine the utter futility. It rises like water, but with the density of earth filling the space around you, making escape impossible as doors become jammed, passages blocked, and the very air becomes too thick to move through. The very air you breathe becomes thick with dust, choking, blinding, scratching at your throat with every desperate gasp. Panic would set in, a primal, overwhelming fear of being buried alive, of having the very breath pressed out of you. And then, as the storm rages, the immense weight of the accumulating sand outside begins to tell its terrible tale. Walls groan, timbers splinter, and roofs buckle with the strain. The sturdy structure of the city, designed to withstand the daily trials of human habitation, collapses under the extraordinary uniform pressure. Houses become mere frameworks, then shattered timbers and broken bricks, then finally nothing more than voids filled with the encroaching desert, their existence obliterated. Think of an entire civilization, its daily routines, its markets, its temples, its homes abruptly ceased. The baker's oven, still warm perhaps, now rapidly cooled, entombed. The pottery wheel, half-finished vessel on its stand, frozen in time, waiting for a hand that will never return. The merchant's ledger, its ink still drying, now buried under layers of ancient sand, its accounts eternally balanced. This is not simply a city abandoned. It is a city caught in the act of living, then instantly paused, then consumed, its vibrant heartbeat stilled in an instant, leaving only the profound quiet of its burial. The dunes act as a geological tomb, sealing away not just the physical structures but also the echoes of lives lived, the very spirit of a place. Unlike a flood that washes away all trace, or a fire that consumes everything to ash, sand preserves, albeit in its own brutal, suffocating way. The dry, oxygen-poor environment deep within a dune can slow decay to an extraordinary degree, almost halting the relentless march of time's erosion. Organic materials, delicate textiles, intricately carved wooden implements, even the mummified remains of creatures or humans, can lie undisturbed for centuries, sometimes millennia, awaiting rediscovery. You are walking now, or rather envisioning yourself walking through a labyrinth of forgotten time, each grain of sand a witness to a bygone era. Imagine the archaeologists of a distant future, perhaps thousands of years from now, meticulously unearthing what remains. They would not find neatly stacked, recognizable ruins like those unearthed from Pompeii's volcanic ash, which formed a hardened cast. Instead, they would excavate chambers of solid, compacted sand, carefully sifting through the dense grains to find the ghosts of walls, the faint impressions of furniture, the ethereal outlines of long-vanished lives. The act of excavation itself becomes a geological unburial, a patient, painstaking peeling back of layers of the earth as if opening a vast, ancient, fragile book whose pages are made of sand and time. The process of entombment by dunes is a testament to the desert's power, its unyielding patience, its capacity for both slow, inexorable change and sudden, catastrophic upheaval. Dunes are not static features. They are immense, living entities constantly shifting, migrating across the landscape like colossal slow-motion waves. They advance, sometimes slowly, sometimes with surprising speed, devouring everything in their path. A single dune can be hundreds of feet high, miles long, containing billions of tons of sand, a mountain of shifting particles. When such a colossal entity rolls over a city, it doesn't just cover it, it absorbs it entirely, consuming it into its very being. You might envision a slow, suffocating wave inching forward year after year, first obscuring the lower levels of buildings, then scaling the walls, finally cresting over the highest towers, a gradual, relentless swallowing. But the legend of cities swallowed overnight speaks to a more dramatic, catastrophic event. Picture the largest of these dunes, suddenly mobilized by exceptional hurricane-force winds, moving with the unstoppable force of a tidal wave, but a wave of solid earth. It would not merely sweep over the city, it would engulf it instantly, burying it under a sudden, overwhelming weight, an avalanche of sand that leaves no trace. The sand, in its sheer volume and dryness, acts as a profound preserving agent. It protects the buried remains from erosion by wind and surface water, from the destructive ravages of animal scavengers, and crucially from the chemical decomposition that requires oxygen and moisture to flourish. You might think of it as a natural sarcophagus, a massive airtight coffin carved by the elements themselves, designed by nature to hold its secrets. Within this tomb, the atmospheric conditions remain remarkably stable, creating a microenvironment conducive to the extraordinary survival of even the most delicate archaeological artifacts. Consider the profound silence within such a tomb. Outside, the wind might howl, relentlessly shifting new layers of sand, perpetuating the desert's eternal cycle of creation and destruction, a never-ending sigh across the vast expanse. But deep beneath, in the very heart of the buried city, there is an absolute stillness, a quiet so complete it is almost deafening in its intensity. No wind, no sound of life, no light penetrates these depths. Just the oppressive, crushing weight of the sand, holding everything in a cold, eternal embrace, a perpetual twilight of the past. You can almost feel that silence pressing in on you, a profound quiet that speaks of ultimate finality, yet also of a strange, preserved peace. This geological tomb also presents unique and formidable challenges for those who seek to uncover its secrets. Unlike the relatively clear stratigraphy of other archaeological sites, a sand-buried city can be a chaotic, disorienting mix of collapsed structures and wind-blown deposits, lacking clear demarcation. The very act of digging can cause further collapse, or obscure delicate artifacts with new falls of sand, making every brushstroke an act of extreme precision and care. The desert, even in its role as preserver, maintains its fierce, unyielding protectiveness over its buried treasures, demanding respect and meticulous effort from those who dare to disturb its sleep. Yet, it is precisely this unique entombment that makes these sites so incredibly invaluable, so utterly compelling to our understanding of the human story. They are not merely ruins. They are pristine snapshots in time, frozen moments of ancient life, offering unparalleled insights into civilizations that might otherwise be utterly lost to history, mere whispers in dusty texts. Imagine a merchant's shop, its pottery still on display, its scales perhaps resting on a counter, albeit all now deeply buried in sand. Or a temple, its altars still adorned with dried offerings, its sacred carvings remarkably intact, now interred beneath the vast, shifting expanse of the desert. You are not just imagining a city, you are imagining a moment, a second, suspended forever in the grainy amber of time. The desert does not merely bury, it meticulously creates a new landscape, a new, deceivingly bland surface that gives no hint of the rich, complex history lying dormant beneath. You could walk for miles across these seemingly barren, featureless plains, unaware that directly beneath your feet lie the remnants of bustling streets, crowded markets, and towering monuments. The desert is the ultimate illusionist, a master of disguise, cloaking its deepest secrets under a veil of endless, inscrutable sand, waiting for the wind to reveal or conceal. This entombment is a powerful reminder of nature's profound dominance, a humbling testament to the impermanence of even our most robust human endeavors. Even our grandest creations, our most enduring cities, can be rendered invisible, absorbed into the very fabric of the earth by the relentless, indifferent march of geological processes. The sand becomes more than just a burial shroud. It becomes the very earth itself, transformed by wind into an all-consuming, silent, and ultimately preserving force. You feel the vastness of this transformation, the profound shift from vibrant life to silent slumber. A city, once a beacon of human ingenuity and resilience, now becomes a silent, subterranean whisper, its vibrant narrative paused indefinitely. Its stories are not erased but meticulously archived within the impenetrable layers of sand, waiting for the right moment, the right hand to patiently unearth them. The desert's final absolute word, delivered with such devastating swiftness, transforms into a promise of geological preservation, a strange, beautiful paradox where destruction ultimately leads to a form of immortality. The city may be gone from sight, erased from the immediate landscape, but its essence, its very physical memory remains entombed by the dunes, a geological tomb guarding the priceless secrets of the past, holding them in trust for eternity. The promise of geological preservation, that strange, beautiful paradox where destruction ultimately leads to a form of immortality, is not merely a poetic ideal. It is a tangible reality, a whispered invitation for those brave enough to seek out the desert's hidden archives. You stand now at the precipice of this endeavor, no longer gazing at the abstract concept of entombment, but preparing to join the quest to exhume these silent witnesses of history. Imagine the sheer scale of the challenge. The desert stretches before you, a boundless canvas of shifting dunes and stark, unyielding rock. How do you begin to pinpoint the exact location where an entire civilization once thrived, only to be swallowed whole by a sudden, devastating surge of sand? For centuries, these lost cities were the stuff of legend, tantalizing tales carried on the wind by nomads, vague memories whispered around campfires. Their existence was more myth than fact, until the intrepid spirit of exploration, fueled by curiosity and an unshakable belief, began to pierce the veil of sand. Early desert explorers, often amateur archaeologists or adventurers, relied on instinct, old maps sometimes riddled with inaccuracies, and the invaluable handed-down knowledge of local inhabitants. They sought out subtle topographical changes, the faintest hint of an unnatural rise in the terrain, a scattering of pottery shards glinting under the harsh sun, or perhaps a faint outline of a wall partially exposed by a recent sandstorm. It was a monumental task, akin to searching for a single grain of sand in an infinite beach, but with the added weight of history riding on every careful step. Today the quest is still arduous, but technology lends an invisible hand. You might find yourself on an aerial survey, gazing down from a small plane or a drone, its sophisticated sensors peering beneath the surface. Ground-penetrating radar, magnetic gradiometers, and thermal imaging systems can detect anomalies hidden meters below, revealing the buried outlines of streets, buildings, and fortifications that the human eye could never perceive. These tools are the modern divining rods, helping to narrow the vast expanse into manageable, promising zones. Yet even with all this advanced equipment, the true discovery, the moment of revelation, still rests on human intuition and the tireless grind of physical labor. Once a promising site is identified, the real work begins. You feel the grit of the sand between your fingers, taste its dry, mineral tang on your tongue. The sun beats down with an unforgiving intensity, blurring the horizon with heat haze. It is a world of stark contrasts, blinding light and deep shadow, oppressive heat and the subtle coolness of newly exposed earth. You join the team, a small band of dedicated individuals, each movement precise, each scoop of sand a deliberate act of uncovering. The excavation is not a frantic digging, but a meticulous, almost surgical process. You do not simply remove sand, you peel back layers of time. Every shovelful, every brush stroke, is performed with an almost sacred reverence for what lies beneath. What was once the destructive force of the desert now becomes the very medium through which history is revealed. The sand, once an agent of obliteration, becomes the meticulous preserver, holding artifacts in a state of suspended animation, often for hundreds or even thousands of years. As you work, you notice the subtle shifts. The sand changes color, texture. Suddenly, your trowel scrapes against something solid, something not natural. It might be a fragment of fired clay, a shard of painted pottery, still vibrant with ancient patterns. Or perhaps a piece of worked stone, the smooth edge of a foundation brick, a telltale sign of human construction. These are the first whispers from the past, the initial clues in the grand archaeological riddle. The ghost cities swallowed by sand overnight offer a unique window into antiquity. Unlike sites that slowly faded, ravaged by centuries of looting, erosion, or deliberate destruction, these cities were often frozen in time, much like Pompeii. The suddenness of their burial means that ordinary objects of daily life were not carefully packed away or carried off. They were abandoned in haste, left precisely where they were used, giving archaeologists an unprecedented snapshot of a bustling moment. You might uncover a humble clay pot still resting on a hearth, its contents long turned to dust, but its form perfectly preserved. Perhaps a child's forgotten toy, a small, carved animal, buried under the threshold of a collapsed doorway. Imagine finding a storeroom filled with jars of grain, perfectly carbonized but still recognizable. Or the remnants of a weaver's loom, its intricate threads still faintly discernible within the packed sand. These are not treasures of gold or jewels, though such finds are certainly exhilarating, but rather the invaluable treasures of everyday existence. They allow you to glimpse the texture of ancient life, the habits, the anxieties, and the simple joys of people long gone. The riddles deepen with each discovery. Why was this city abandoned so suddenly? Was it a natural disaster, a massive sandstorm that choked the life out of the settlement, burying it too quickly for inhabitants to flee with their possessions? Or was it a more complex environmental catastrophe, a slow creeping desertification that suddenly accelerated, leaving no time for a planned exodus? The artifacts themselves often hold the keys to these questions. The types of crops found, the architectural adaptations to the environment, the evidence of trade routes, the presence or absence of defensive structures. All these pieces of a vast jigsaw puzzle help reconstruct the narrative. Consider the layout of a street emerging from the sand. You can almost hear the echoes of ancient footsteps on the packed earth. The foundations of houses, shops, and public buildings begin to reveal the city's plan. A temple complex might rise majestically, its altars still intact, though perhaps without their original adornments. A marketplace might show the depressions where stalls once stood, the remnants of goods scattered across the floor. You might find coins, tools, jewelry, cooking utensils, even fragments of textiles, all meticulously catalogued and studied. The remarkable thing is not just what survives but how it survives. The dry, oxygen-poor environment of the desert, coupled with the insulating properties of the sand, creates an ideal preservation chamber. Organic materials, which would normally decay rapidly in other climates, can persist for millennia here. Wooden beams, woven baskets, leather goods, even delicate papyrus scrolls or textile fragments, can sometimes be found in astonishing condition, offering details about ancient technology, art, and literacy that would otherwise be lost to time. However, the sand is also a fickle preserver. While it protects from oxygen and moisture, its abrasive nature can scour surfaces, and the sheer weight of millions of tons of sand can crush delicate structures. Thus, archaeologists must also contend with the challenges of fragile finds, meticulously stabilizing and documenting each item in situ before carefully extracting it for further study in controlled environments. As you continue to excavate, the ghost city slowly sheds its shroud of sand, layer by painstaking layer. It is a slow, meditative dance between man and earth, a conversation across millennia. Each uncovered object, each revealed wall, poses new questions and offers new insights, pushing the boundaries of what we understand about ancient civilizations and their complex relationship with their environment. The work is never truly finished, for even after a site is fully excavated, the interpretation and reinterpretation of its findings continue, evolving with new theories and technologies. The ghost cities of the desert are not merely ruins. They are grand archaeological riddles, waiting for your patient gaze, your gentle touch, and your inquisitive mind to decipher their long-held secrets. They whisper tales of forgotten people, lost empires, and the enduring power of nature to both destroy and preserve. You are not just unearthing buildings, you are bringing entire worlds back into the light, giving voice to the silent, You stand amidst these resurrected structures, dust clinging to your boots, and a profound question inevitably rises. How could entire civilizations vanish so completely, so swiftly beneath mountains of sand? For the people who witnessed these changes, for those who lived near the encroaching dunes or heard the whispered tales from generations past, the answers were often born of awe and fear, rooted in the realm of the divine or the deeply mystical. Imagine yourself living in such a time. You would watch the horizon daily, seeing the subtle creep, then the inexorable march of the golden tide. Your fertile fields, once providing abundant harvests, begin to choke under the grains. Your irrigation canals, the lifeblood of your community, slowly fill and become impassable. Houses, once vibrant with family life, are swallowed room by room, then roof by roof. The wind, once a gentle whisper, becomes a roaring antagonist, a sculptor of desolation. What would you conclude? Without the sophisticated understanding of meteorology, geology, or climatology that we possess today, how would you rationalize such a devastating, overwhelming force? It is no wonder that the ancients often turned to the heavens for explanation. They spoke of divine wrath, of cities cursed for their hubris or their transgressions against powerful deities. Legends abound of gods angered by human impiety, unleashing the desert as a terrible punishment. Perhaps a king offended a sky god, or a community strayed from ancient customs. The sand became not merely an environmental phenomenon, but a physical manifestation of a celestial judgment, a permanent scar upon the land left by an offended deity. You would hear tales of entire populations fleeing in terror, believing their very existence had been deemed unworthy, that the earth itself was turning against them under divine command. The desert was not just a place, it was an active agent of punishment, its shifting dunes the restless fingers of an angry god. Some cultures whispered of sorcery, of powerful shamans or malevolent spirits conjuring the sandstorms, weaving spells of desolation. They believed rival tribes or vengeful individuals could harness dark magic to call forth the winds and the choking dust, burying their enemies and their settlements under an inescapable blanket of grit. You might participate in elaborate rituals, offering sacrifices, chanting incantations, desperately trying to appease these unseen forces or counter the dark arts that you believed were consuming your world. The fear was palpable, a constant companion to the rustling of the wind and the sight of distant sand plumes. This was a world where cause and effect were often hidden, where the inexplicable became the supernatural. The desert, in these narratives, was not just a natural feature, but a living, malevolent entity, an active participant in human affairs, capable of vengeance and destruction on an unimaginable scale. As centuries turned into millennia, and as human understanding slowly began to shed some of its purely supernatural interpretations, the explanations for these vanished cities started to shift, though often remaining within the realm of moralizing tales or broad, unproven hypotheses. You might have heard scholars in later eras debate the decline of great empires, attributing their downfall to moral decay, military weakness, or economic collapse, with the encroaching desert merely a grim backdrop to their inevitable demise. The sand was still seen as a powerful force, but perhaps less a direct divine hand, and more a natural consequence or a silent witness to human failure. Yet, the precise mechanisms, the scientific how, remained largely elusive, buried as deeply as the cities themselves. Today, with the powerful tools of modern science at our disposal, your understanding of these ancient environmental catastrophes is far more nuanced, though no less awe-inspiring. We speak not of curses or angry gods, but of complex geological processes, shifts in global climate, and the delicate, often precarious balance between human activity and the natural world. One of the most profound revelations stems from the study of ancient climates. You must understand that the Sahara, for example, has not always been the vast, arid expanse we know today. Thousands of years ago, what is now parched desert was a vibrant, fertile landscape, teeming with wildlife, dotted with lakes, rivers, and lush grasslands. Imagine a savanna stretching for hundreds of miles, where giraffes grazed and hippopotamuses wallowed in cool waters. The people who lived there thrived, building sophisticated societies in what seems to us an impossibly green Sahara. But then the climate began to change. These were not sudden, catastrophic shifts, but rather gradual, relentless transformations spanning centuries. You can envision a slow drying and annual lessening of rainfall, imperceptible over a single lifetime, but devastating across generations. The great monsoon systems that once brought life-giving moisture began to shift their patterns, moving further south, leaving vast regions progressively drier. The lakes began to shrink, their shores receding year after year. Rivers dwindled to mere trickles, then disappeared entirely, leaving behind only the ghost of their ancient beds. The grasslands withered, giving way to hardy shrubs, then eventually to barren earth, vulnerable to the wind. This process is known as desertification, and it is a powerful force of nature, often exacerbated by human hands. As the land became drier, people clung to dwindling water sources. They may have overgrazed their livestock, stripping the remaining vegetation that held the soil in place. They might have cut down forests for fuel and building materials, further exposing the fragile topsoil to the relentless sun and wind. You can picture the dust storms becoming more frequent, more intense, carrying away the precious fertile earth that had taken millennia to form. This loss of vegetation creates a feedback loop. Less plant cover means more exposed soil, which heats up faster, leading to less rainfall, and thus even less vegetation. A vicious cycle of desiccation. And then the sand. The desert, always a presence on the periphery, began its inexorable march. Driven by prevailing winds, vast quantities of sand, freed from the binding roots of plants, began to mobilize. These are not just gentle breezes. These are persistent, powerful winds capable of moving entire dunes. You can visualize colossal waves of sand hundreds of feet high, rolling across the landscape like a slow-motion ocean. These dunes, sometimes advancing by several feet a year, are unstoppable. They climb over obstacles, burying trees, then homes, then entire settlements. The idea of a city being swallowed overnight is often an exaggeration born of human perception and oral tradition. While a particularly violent sandstorm might render a dwelling uninhabitable and swiftly cover it, the complete burial of an entire city is usually a process that unfolded over decades, sometimes centuries. Yet, for those living through it, seeing their world consumed by the advancing sand, it must have felt as if the very ground beneath their feet was being erased in a single terrifying instant. The speed of the encroaching desert, relative to a human lifespan, can certainly feel sudden, even apocalyptic. You might go to sleep in a bustling town and wake to find your street partially submerged, your doorway blocked by a new mound of sand. The feeling of helplessness against such a relentless, overwhelming force would have been profound. So, when you consider these ghost cities today, when you walk among their newly revealed walls, you are not only witnessing the stark power of nature but also the poignant echoes of ancient fears and modern understanding. The initial wonder and terror that led people to conjure tales of curses and divine retribution, those visceral human reactions to inexplicable catastrophe, now coexist with the rigorous scientific pursuit of evidence and explanation. You can almost feel the weight of both theories in the air, a blend of ancient mysticism and modern empiricism. The sand, once seen as an instrument of divine vengeance, is now understood as a complex geological agent, shaped by atmospheric forces and millennia of climatic shifts. The vanished cities are no longer just proof of heavenly displeasure, but powerful lessons in environmental vulnerability, the fragility of ecosystems, and the long-term consequences of climate change, both natural and increasingly human-induced. You are not just observing ruins, you are seeing the physical manifestation of Earth's dynamic history, a history that speaks volumes about resilience, adaptation, and ultimately the unforgiving power of a changing world. And as you sift through these grains of sand, you are sifting through the layers of time, of belief and of scientific discovery, searching for the truth that lies beneath. Each grain holds a story, a fragment of the past, waiting for your interpretation. You kneel now, feeling the cool, surprisingly firm ground beneath your hands, no longer merely observing the vastness of the desert, but actively engaging with its hidden depths. The wind, which sculpted dunes above, now whispers across the very soil you are about to disturb. Your gaze shifts from the infinite horizon to the intimate space of an archaeological trench, a carefully excavated window into a forgotten world. This is where the abstract notion of stories in the sand becomes tangible. This is where hypotheses are tested, and where the human past in all its fragile detail begins to emerge. Imagine the sound, the rhythmic scrape of a trowel against hardened earth, a soft rustle as brushes delicately sweep away centuries of accumulated dust. You might hear the quiet murmur of archaeologists, their voices low, reverent, as they unearth a new clue. There is a palpable tension in the air, a mixture of scientific rigor and an almost spiritual awe. You are not just digging, you are peeling back the skin of time itself. And then it appears. A shard of pottery, perhaps, its surface still bearing the faint imprint of a finger, a design long faded but hinting at its original vibrancy. It is not just a piece of broken clay, it is a direct line to someone who lived here, whose hands shaped it, whose lips perhaps drank from it. This is the magic of the artifact. It transforms an abstract historical narrative into a deeply personal one. As you look closer, you see patterns emerge. One fragment leads to another, then another, until the outline of a vessel begins to take shape in your mind's eye. Maybe it is a storage jar, once filled with grain or water, essential provisions for daily survival in this harsh environment. Or perhaps it is a delicate bowl, used for serving food during a family meal, a small piece of domestic tranquility preserved by the very forces that erased its home. Each chip, each crack, tells a story of use, of repair, of eventual breakage. The artifacts are not limited to pottery. Deeper still, or perhaps just beneath a thin layer of sand in another section, you might uncover tools. A stone grinding implement, worn smooth by countless hours of preparing flour, or a bronze chisel, its edge dulled but still sharp enough to remind you of the skilled craftspeople who once shaped wood or stone with it. These are the instruments of labor, the extensions of human ingenuity. They speak of resourcefulness, of adaptation, of the constant struggle and triumph of human endeavor. You might find personal adornments. Imagine the thrill of seeing a small bead, a vibrant blue or red, carefully threaded into a necklace or bracelet. Or a delicate gold earring, perhaps still attached to the remains of a textile it once adorned. These are not merely decorative items. They are expressions of identity, of status, of belief. They connect you to the vanity, the aspirations, and the aesthetic sensibilities of a people long gone. What kind of person wore this? What occasion was it for? Who did they wish to impress or attract? These tiny treasures whisper secrets of human connection and self-expression. And then there are the more profound discoveries. Imagine uncovering the remains of a marketplace. You can almost hear the echoes of bartering, the clamor of vendors, the footsteps of shoppers. There are weights and measures indicating a bustling economy. Broken amphorae that once held olive oil or wine from distant lands, revealing trade routes that spanned continents. Coins, often found scattered, tell tales of economic exchange, of the wealth and influence that once flowed through these streets. These places were the beating heart of the city, vibrant hubs of human interaction, commerce, and culture. Move further into the excavated site, and you might encounter the remnants of a home. A domestic hearth, still stained with the soot of ancient fires, where families gathered for warmth and food. Storage pits filled with the carbonized remains of seeds or grains, revealing the agricultural practices that sustained the population. Even the layout of the rooms, the types of materials used for walls and floors, offer intimate glimpses into the daily rhythms of life. You can almost visualize children playing in the courtyards, meals being prepared, stories being told around the fire. Perhaps you find a shrine or a temple. Here the artifacts shift in nature. Small figurines, votive offerings left for deities, tell you about the spiritual landscape of the city. Inscriptions on stone tablets or clay, painstakingly deciphered, reveal prayers, laws, or historical records. Incense burners, still carrying the faint scent of ancient resins, evoke the solemnity of rituals performed centuries ago. These are the places where meaning was made, where communities sought solace, guidance, and connection to something larger than themselves. They reveal the intricate web of beliefs that underpin the society, their hopes, their fears, and their understanding of the cosmos. The challenge of excavation in sand is immense. While sand can be a magnificent preserver, encasing objects and preventing decay by shielding them from oxygen and moisture, it can also be a brutal destroyer. Wind erosion can abrade surfaces, leaving ghostly traces of once intricate details. The sheer volume and movement of sand can crush delicate structures, twisting and fracturing artifacts as it engulfs them. Yet, it is this very struggle against the elements that makes each discovery so profoundly significant. The fragility of these finds underscores the preciousness of the past. These unearthed objects do more than just exist, they speak. They confirm historical records, sometimes filling in gaps in texts that were incomplete or lost. More often they challenge preconceived notions, forcing historians and archaeologists to rewrite chapters of the past. Perhaps a city thought to be a small trading post reveals evidence of sophisticated metalwork or advanced water management systems, suggesting a much higher level of societal development. Or perhaps artifacts from a supposedly homogeneous culture show unexpected influences from distant civilizations, indicating broader networks of trade and cultural exchange than previously imagined. Modern technology plays a crucial role in bringing these secrets to light. Ground-penetrating radar allows teams to map subsurface structures without disturbing the delicate layers above. Drones provide aerial perspectives, helping to identify potential sites and understand the broader urban plan. Advanced imaging techniques can reveal faded texts or intricate designs on artifacts that are invisible to the naked eye. This fusion of ancient mysteries and cutting-edge science creates an extraordinary synergy, accelerating our understanding of these lost worlds. Once unearthed, these treasures require immense care. The delicate process of conservation begins immediately, protecting them from further degradation once exposed to the air. Each artifact is meticulously cleaned, documented, catalogued, and then often stabilized to ensure its survival for future generations. They are taken from the silence of the desert floor to the controlled environments of laboratories and museums, where they continue to tell their stories, providing invaluable insights into human history, ingenuity, and resilience. You stand amidst these remnants, surrounded by the physical echoes of lives lived centuries ago. A small clay lamp, blackened by soot, suggests evenings spent in quiet conversation or diligent work. A child's toy, simple and worn, evokes the universal joy of play. A broken statue of a deity, its face weathered, speaks of faith and devotion. Each object is a direct testament to the human experience, a bridge spanning the vast chasm of time. These are not just mute objects, they are storytellers. They invite you to reconstruct the daily routines, the grand ceremonies, the triumphs and tragedies of people who once thrived in these now silent cities. They offer a tangible connection to the ingenuity, the artistry, and the enduring spirit of humanity. As the sun sets, casting long shadows across the excavated trenches, you understand that the work here is never truly finished. Each artifact discovered poses new questions, sparking new research, inviting new interpretations. The sand may have swallowed these cities, but it also preserved their legacy, a legacy slowly, painstakingly, being brought back to light, one precious piece at a time. The secrets beneath the surface are not merely historical facts. They are profound reminders of our shared human journey, echoing across the millennia, waiting for you to listen. They are a testament to the enduring power of discovery, and the timeless fascination with understanding who we were, and by extension who we are. The dust of ages settles, but the stories continue to resonate, carried on the desert wind, and held firmly in the palm of your hand. The dust of ages settles, but the stories continue to resonate, carried on the desert wind, and held firmly in the palm of your hand. Yet, this tangible connection, this fleeting touch with history, is often precariously balanced. The very act of unearthing these ancient desert cities, preserved for millennia by the shifting sands, begins a new and urgent chapter. You see, the desert, a patient preserver for so long, now transforms into a formidable adversary. Once exposed, these treasures face a relentless race against time. You stand at the edge of an excavated trench, the sun beating down, mirroring the intensity of the work unfolding around you. The air hums not just with the heat, but with a palpable urgency. For every shard of pottery brought to light, for every wall painstakingly revealed, the clock ticks louder. The elements, held at bay for centuries, rush in to reclaim what was theirs. Wind, carrying abrasive sand, gnaws at exposed surfaces. Fluctuations in temperature, the brutal daytime heat giving way to the cold desert nights, cause expansion and contraction, weakening structures that stood solid for thousands of years. Rain, though rare, can be devastating, eroding delicate mud brick and dissolving ancient plaster. This is the grim reality of archaeological salvage, a high-stakes endeavor where the past fights for its very survival in the present. It is a battle waged not just against nature, but sometimes against human forces as well. Rapid development, agricultural expansion, even illicit looting, can threaten sites long before archaeologists have a chance to even assess their value. You hear the stories from the teams, their voices tinged with a blend of frustration and fierce determination. They recount instances where a historical site, known only from ancient texts, was confirmed through satellite imagery, only for a development project to break ground just weeks later. The scramble to extract as much information as possible, to save what can be saved, becomes a desperate, almost heroic undertaking. Imagine the scene, a vast expanse of desert, broken only by the shimmering heat haze. Then a sudden, stark realization. An ancient city, once thriving, now vulnerable. You see the archaeologists not just as scientists but as custodians, as protectors. Their work is meticulous, yes, but also incredibly fast-paced, a delicate dance between precision and urgency. They cannot simply dig at leisure. They must assess, prioritize, and act with extraordinary efficiency. The tools of this trade are both ancient and cutting-edge. You watch as a team uses tiny brushes and trowels, moving grains of sand with surgeon-like care, revealing a mosaic floor. Simultaneously, drones fly overhead, mapping the site in 3 dimensions, capturing an unparalleled level of detail that would take months to record by hand. Ground-penetrating radar scans beneath the surface, identifying buried structures, allowing teams to target their efforts, to maximize the impact of every precious hour. This is not the slow, romantic dig often portrayed in films. This is an organized, technologically advanced operation, driven by the profound understanding that every second counts. Consider the challenges they face. The very environment that preserved these cities now conspires against them. The intense sun can bake and crack exposed artifacts. Delicate organic materials like wood, textiles, or even papyri, which survive due to the dry desert air, can rapidly deteriorate when brought into contact with atmospheric moisture or direct sunlight. You witness conservators working under shade cloths, stabilizing a fragment of painted wall, applying a strengthening solution to prevent it from flaking apart before it can even be fully documented. Specialized field laboratories, often little more than tents equipped with advanced tools, become havens for these fragile finds, where preliminary conservation work can begin immediately. The logistical nightmares are legion. Water, food, shelter, and medical supplies must be brought in, often across vast, inhospitable terrain. Temperatures routinely soar above 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Sandstorms can halt operations for days, burying newly cleared sections and forcing the teams to start anew. Yet the work continues. The dedication is unwavering. You speak with a seasoned archaeologist, her face weathered by years under the desert sun, her eyes alight with a passion that transcends mere academic interest. She tells you that each recovered piece is a voice, a whisper from the past, and that it is their sacred duty to ensure those voices are heard. The focus shifts from grand structures to the minutiae, because even the smallest artifact tells a story. A worn sandal, a child's toy, a discarded cooking pot, these are not mere objects. They are windows into daily life, into the routines, the joys, and the struggles of people who walked these very streets thousands of years ago. To lose them is to lose a piece of the human tapestry, a thread in the intricate weaving of our collective history. So, the salvage operation is not just about preserving physical objects. It is about preserving knowledge, understanding, and empathy. The process of removal itself is an art. Imagine a fresco, its pigments still vibrant after 2,000 years, but its plaster now fragile. It cannot simply be chipped off the wall. Skilled conservators might apply a facing, a protective layer, before carefully detaching it, sometimes in multiple sections, for transport to a climate-controlled laboratory. Each piece is meticulously catalogued, photographed from every angle, its precise location recorded with geographical coordinates down to the centimeter. This context, the exact spot where an object was found in relation to other objects and structures, is often as important as the object itself. Without it, a discovery loses much of its meaning. You learn that this race against time is also a race against the very nature of discovery. Once a site is excavated, it is fundamentally altered. The protective layers of sand are gone. What was once hidden and preserved is now exposed and vulnerable. Therefore, meticulous documentation is paramount. Even if an artifact cannot be saved in its entirety, the comprehensive record of its existence, its context, and its condition becomes an invaluable contribution to our understanding. It is a form of digital preservation, creating a lasting archive even if the physical object succumbs to the ravages of time and exposure. The collaboration required is immense. You see teams from multiple nations working alongside local communities, sharing expertise, respect, and a common goal. This is not just foreign experts parachuting in. It is a partnership forged in the challenging conditions of the field, united by the shared belief in the importance of cultural heritage. Local workers, often with an innate understanding of the landscape and its history, bring in valuable skills and knowledge to the excavation. They are not merely laborers. They are integral members of the team, their eyes often spotting details that an outsider might miss. As you consider the enormity of the task, the sheer scale of the desert, and the countless untold stories still buried beneath its surface, you feel a profound sense of awe mixed with a touch of melancholy. Awe for the ingenuity and resilience of the ancient peoples who built these cities, and awe for the tireless efforts of those who strive to save their legacy. Melancholy, perhaps, for the knowledge that much will undoubtedly be lost, swallowed again by the sands, or by the relentless march of modern progress, before it can ever be fully understood. But that melancholy is overshadowed by hope. The hope that each unearthed fragment, each documented wall, each painstakingly preserved inscription, contributes to a larger tapestry of human history. The hope that through this race against time, we are not just salvaging stones and pottery, but salvaging understanding, connection, and a deeper appreciation for the intricate journey of humanity. The work continues, piece by precious piece, an urgent whisper rising from the desert floor, urging us to listen before the silence descends once more. The urgent whisper rising from the desert floor is not merely a plea for understanding, but a profound warning. It is a voice echoing across millennia, sharing the stark truths of what can happen when civilizations forget their place within the delicate balance of the natural world. These cities, once vibrant and powerful, now swallowed by sand, are silent monuments to humanity's triumphs and, more tellingly, to its catastrophic missteps. You stand now on the metaphorical threshold of one such forgotten metropolis. Imagine the wind, not just carrying grains of sand, but also the weight of forgotten decisions. You hear the phantom echoes of an ancient marketplace, now buried deep beneath your feet, and you ponder the forces that extinguished its vibrant life. What truly happened here, beyond the simple narrative of a sandstorm or a shift in the desert? The archaeological record, painstakingly assembled, tells a more complex and often unsettling story. One of the most potent lessons from these lost desert cities revolves around the fickle hand of nature and humanity's often arrogant response to it. You look out across an expanse that was once a fertile oasis, perhaps fed by a meandering river or an intricate system of underground channels. But the river shifted its course, or the underground water table, carefully managed for centuries, began to dwindle. Perhaps a prolonged drought, part of a larger climatic shift, gripped the region for decades, even centuries. You feel the relentless sun on your skin, and you understand how easily a lifeline can become a death sentence. Consider the Nabatean city of Petra, a marvel of hydraulic engineering carved into rose-red cliffs. Its inhabitants mastered water collection and storage in an arid environment, enabling a thriving civilization for hundreds of years. But even their ingenuity had limits. When trade routes shifted and regional climates grew harsher, their intricate systems were tested to their breaking point. You walk through the narrow Sick, the dramatic entrance to the city, and you are struck by the sheer audacity of their urban planning in such a challenging landscape. Yet even Petra, with all its brilliance, eventually faded, its people dispersing, its grand structures left to the mercy of wind and time. The water that gave it life also, in its scarcity, signaled its decline. Then there are the Silk Road cities, strung like pearls across the Central Asian deserts. Samarkand, Bokhara, Merv. While not all are completely buried, their histories are rife with examples of how critical water resources dictated their fortunes. They flourished when rivers like the Zarafshan and the Murghab flowed strong, supporting vast irrigation networks that transformed arid lands into agricultural powerhouses. But diversion of rivers, excessive upstream use, or natural shifts in riverbeds could spell disaster for cities downstream. You see in your mind's eye the vast, intricate canals that once fed fields of wheat and cotton, now dust-filled trenches. You understand that their prosperity was built on a foundation as fragile as a single drop of water. These stories underscore a critical warning for our own era. The climate crisis of today, with its rising temperatures, extreme weather events, and ever-expanding deserts, mirrors the ancient challenges that doomed these settlements. You feel the heat of the present day, and it whispers of the past. Are we, in our modern hubris, making the same mistakes? Are we pushing our water systems, our agricultural lands, our very ecosystems, beyond their capacity for resilience? The lesson extends beyond just environmental changes. Human actions, often driven by short-sighted ambition or a failure to adapt, played a crucial role. Deforestation for construction materials, fuel, or to clear land for farming, stripped away vital topsoil. You visualize ancient forests, now only a distant memory, sacrificed for immediate needs. Without the trees to hold the soil, winds picked up, carrying away fertile earth and piling sand onto cultivated fields and even entire towns. The very sand that now buries these cities was often mobilized by the hands of their own inhabitants. You consider the city of Ubar, sometimes called the Atlantis of the Sands, a legendary trading hub in the Arabian Peninsula. Its eventual disappearance is largely attributed to the collapse of its unique natural water source, a massive limestone cavern, perhaps due to over-extraction or a natural geological shift. It also faced shifts in trade routes, as sea travel became more dominant than overland caravans. This dual assault, environmental and economic, proved insurmountable. You imagine the merchants, once bustling with trade, now packing their bags, leaving behind an increasingly desolate settlement. What does this tell us about our own globalized economy and its reliance on finite resources and shifting trade patterns? You reflect on the vulnerability of single-industry towns, of nations overly dependent on specific resources, or supply chains that can be disrupted by a single event, natural or man-made. The desert cities offer a chilling precedent for the fragility of interconnected systems. The people of these buried cities were not fools. They were ingenious, resourceful, and often deeply connected to their environment. Yet, their strategies, brilliant for one epoch, became inadequate for the next. Their societal structures, rigid and resistant to change, may have prevented the radical adaptations necessary for survival. You consider the weight of tradition, of established power structures, of deeply ingrained practices. How difficult it must have been to abandon centuries-old ways when the very ground beneath their feet was shifting. This gives you pause to reflect on our own societies. Are we, too, trapped by outdated paradigms, by political inertia, by an unwillingness to make difficult choices for long-term sustainability? Are we prioritizing short-term economic gains over the health of the planet and the well-being of future generations? The sands of time spare no one. They have no political affiliation, no respect for wealth or power. The warnings from the lost are not just about environmental collapse, but about societal collapse. When resources dwindle, when the environment degrades, social tensions rise. Conflict over water, food, and arable land would have become inevitable. You imagine the growing desperation, the breakdown of order, the slow unraveling of a once cohesive community. Migration away from the dying city would have been a final, heartbreaking act of survival. These desert cities, now silent beneath the dunes, scream a powerful message. They remind us that civilizations are not eternal. They are fragile constructs, utterly dependent on the health of their environment and the wisdom of their leaders and citizens. They remind us that ingenuity, while vital, is not enough if it is not coupled with foresight, adaptability, and a profound respect for the Earth's carrying capacity. As you look upon the vast empty landscapes where these empires once thrived, you are presented with a choice. Will we listen to these ancient voices, these geological historians, these silent prophets of what can befall us? Or will we too allow the sands of our own making, the sands of ignorance, of greed, of inaction, to slowly, inexorably swallow our achievements, our cities, and ultimately our future? The desert does not forget. It preserves its lessons with a brutal honesty. You stand here, a witness across time to the fate of those who did not listen. The heat of the sun on your face, the gritty dust on your tongue, are tangible reminders of the immense power of nature, and the ultimate responsibility we bear to live in harmony with it. The ghost cities whisper their warnings, and it is up to us now to heed them, before our own vibrant metropolises become the next lessons learned, buried beneath the ceaseless, indifferent march of time and sand. You stand now not just as a witness to collapse, but as an inheritor of wisdom. The desert cities, though swallowed by sand, are not truly lost. They are vast, silent libraries, their pages turned by the wind, their stories written in stone, pottery, and bone. What began as a grim lesson in hubris and environmental fragility transforms, through the lens of time and discovery, into an enduring legacy of human ingenuity, resilience, and cultural richness. Imagine yourself in the heart of the Gobi, not in the time of its demise, but in the present day, accompanying an archaeological team. The air is still, save for the whisper of the wind teasing grains across ancient foundations. You are not looking for destruction, but for revelation. The sands that buried these civilizations also preserve them, creating time capsules that offer unparalleled glimpses into lives lived centuries, even millennia, ago. You watch as specialists carefully brush away layers of millennia. Beneath the shifting dunes, you might uncover the intricate irrigation channels of a thriving oasis city, a testament to sophisticated water management techniques in an unforgiving landscape. These are not simple ditches, but but elaborate systems of canets or caras, underground aqueducts that tap distant water sources, defying gravity and evaporation. You trace their paths with your gaze, understanding the collective effort, the deep scientific knowledge, and the sheer will required to bring life-sustaining water to arid lands. This is a legacy of innovation, a blueprint for survival that speaks to us even today, as we grapple with dwindling resources and expanding deserts. Perhaps your hand brushes against a shard of vibrant silk, still retaining some of its color after 1,000 years. It is a whisper from the Silk Road, that ancient network of trade and cultural exchange that crisscrossed these very deserts. These buried cities were not isolated outposts. They were bustling hubs, melting pots where merchants from east and west met, haggled, and shared stories. You can almost hear the clamor of different languages, the jingle of camel bells, the scent of spices and exotic goods in the imagined air. The legacy here is one of interconnectedness, a reminder that human progress has always thrived on the exchange of ideas, technologies, and goods, forging links across vast distances and diverse cultures. You might stumble upon the remnants of a Buddhist stupa, its intricate carvings still visible, depicting scenes of enlightenment and devotion. Or perhaps you find a parchment scroll, painstakingly copied by a scholar in a desert monastery, detailing astronomical observations or philosophical treatises. These are not merely artifacts. They are windows into the intellectual and spiritual lives of people long gone. The sand-buried worlds reveal a profound human capacity for artistic expression, for deep philosophical inquiry, and for spiritual yearning, even in the harshest environments. Their legacy reminds us that beyond the struggle for survival, humanity has always reached for meaning, beauty, and transcendence. Consider the city of Naya, a jewel of the ancient Silk Road, lost to the Taklamakan Desert for 17 centuries. When rediscovered, it revealed not only buildings but entire dwellings filled with incredibly preserved artifacts. Wooden tablets with Kharosthi script, indicating a sophisticated administrative system, intricately woven fabrics, furniture, and even mummified bodies that provide direct genetic links to the past. You can almost feel the texture of the preserved textiles, imagine the warmth of the wooden beds. This is a legacy of intimacy, allowing us to connect with the daily lives of individuals, their personal stories, their hopes and fears, made tangible across the gulf of time. These aren't just ruins, they are echoes of personal histories, whispering their secrets to those patient enough to listen. Or perhaps you envision the legendary Ubar, the Atlantis of the sands, buried beneath the Rub al-Khali in Oman. Its rediscovery, guided by satellite imagery and ancient texts, revealed a once thriving trading post, a testament to ancient frankincense routes. You realize that the very legends of these lost cities, passed down through generations, are themselves a part of the legacy. They are cultural touchstones, narratives that shape our understanding of our past and our place within the vast sweep of history. The persistence of these stories, even when the cities themselves were unseen, speaks to the deep human need to remember, to mythologize, and to learn from the trials and triumphs of those who came before. The enduring legacy is also one of profound ecological lessons, but viewed from a different angle than merely warnings of collapse. It is a legacy of understanding the delicate balance between human aspiration and environmental limits. You observe how communities adapted to fluctuating climates, how they innovated to sustain themselves, and how their ultimate decline often coincided with larger climatic shifts or unsustainable practices. This is not just a story of failure, but a complex tapestry of human-environment interaction, offering insights into resilience, adaptation, and the long-term consequences of our choices. You walk through the ghostly streets of a rediscovered town, the silence broken only by the crunch of your own footsteps on the sand. You pick up a smooth, worn piece of pottery, perhaps part of a water jar. It feels surprisingly heavy in your hand. This simple object connects you directly to someone who held it 1,000 years ago, someone who relied on it for survival, someone who lived and loved and struggled in this very place. The legacy is in this tactile connection, in the sudden realization of shared humanity across the ages. These sand-buried worlds are not merely cautionary tales. They are rich archives of human experience. They teach us about the ebb and flow of civilizations, the cyclical nature of prosperity and decline, and the incredible persistence of the human spirit. They show us that even when confronted with overwhelming environmental forces, people find ways to adapt, to innovate, to create beauty, and to build complex societies. The very act of unearthing them, of meticulously cataloging their contents, is an act of defiance against oblivion, a testament to our own drive to understand where we come from. As you stand amidst these excavated wonders, the hot desert air a living breath against your skin, you realize that the legacy is also for us, the living. These resurrected cities inspire new questions, fuel new research, and challenge our assumptions about history and progress. They provide context for our own modern challenges, inviting us to look beyond immediate concerns and consider the long arc of human civilization. They whisper not just of what was lost, but of what was gained, what was learned, and what can still be preserved. The sand, in its relentless march, both destroyed and preserved. It erased the surface world, yet safeguarded the stories beneath. The legacy of these sand-buried worlds is therefore dual, a stark reminder of our vulnerability, but also a glorious testament to our enduring capacity for greatness, for innovation, for connection, and for meaning even in the face of impermanence. You leave these ancient sites not with a sense of dread, but with a profound appreciation for the human journey, written in the very dust that threatened to erase it all. That dust, which once seemed to threaten total erasure, often became the very foundation for what followed. The land, even after swallowing entire cities, rarely remained truly empty. Humanity possesses an astonishing resilience, a stubborn insistence on finding a way to continue, to build anew, even when confronted by overwhelming natural forces. You might imagine a sudden, apocalyptic end, a world simply vanishing beneath the sand. But the truth is often more nuanced, a slow decline or a partial abandonment, followed by a gradual resurgence, a new chapter written on the very pages of the past. You stand now on the edge of what was once a thriving marketplace, the echoes of commerce long silenced, the structures long entombed. Yet, if you shift your gaze just slightly, perhaps toward a distant cluster of palms, you begin to perceive the subtle patterns of continuation. Life, tenacious and resourceful, finds a way. Perhaps the inhabitants of that lost city did not simply vanish. Perhaps they retreated not far but just enough to escape the encroaching dunes, carrying with them the skills, the knowledge, and the memories of their former home. Imagine a small group, perhaps a few families, gathering what they could from their collapsing homes. They would look for a new place, a site that offered similar advantages to the one they were forced to abandon. Access to water, protection from the elements, proximity to a trade route that might still function. You can picture them, walking away from the slowly dissolving walls, their eyes scanning the horizon for signs of hope. They knew the desert, understood its unforgiving nature, but also its hidden springs and seasonal oases. It is here, in this very human act of seeking and rebuilding, that the ruins begin their second life. The buried city, though silent, becomes a silent provider. You see the evidence of this across countless desert landscapes. The stones themselves, once the proud facades of temples and homes, become a quarry for new settlements. A new village might sprout up just a few kilometers away, its modest houses built from blocks carefully scavenged from the sands that covered its predecessor. You can almost feel the weight of those ancient stones in your hands, transformed, repurposed, carrying the echoes of old lives into new ones. The very infrastructure of the old city could sometimes offer a paradoxical advantage. An ancient, well-constructed cistern, though filled with sand, might still hold the potential for water, its location remembered through generations of oral tradition. A deep well, once abandoned as the water table shifted or the city was lost, might, with renewed effort, be reopened. You follow the invisible lines of ancient water channels, imagining the careful work of digging, clearing, and restoring, bringing life back to a parched landscape. These new beginnings were not always grand, not always on the scale of the cities they replaced, but they were vital. They represented survival. The pathways of trade, too, often persisted, albeit with subtle shifts. A caravanserai once bustling might fall silent, but the general direction of the route, the knowledge of safe passages through the desert, would remain. New resting places, new markets, would emerge along these enduring arteries. You trace the faint paths, barely visible depressions in the sand, that connect distant points, understanding that these invisible threads are the very capillaries of commerce and culture, constantly adapting to the changing landscape. New communities, sometimes very small, would cluster around these new nodes, keeping the flow of goods and ideas alive. Perhaps the most profound way new life rose from the ruins was through the continuation of cultural and spiritual practices. A sacred site, a burial ground, or a place associated with powerful ancestors, even if buried, might retain its significance. New shrines, new places of worship, could be established nearby, drawing on the memory and mystique of the ancient location. You can imagine pilgrims traveling to the vicinity of a lost temple, offering prayers to the buried gods, ensuring that the spiritual essence of the place endured, even if its physical form was lost to sight. The desert itself, seemingly an agent of destruction, can also be an agent of transformation that enables new growth. As sand encroaches and buries, it can also stabilize the soil, create new landforms, and sometimes even raise the water table in unexpected ways in certain areas, forming new oases or expanding existing ones. You observe the changing dunes, the way they move and settle, understanding that these dynamic shifts are not just destructive, but part of a larger, slower cycle of renewal. What was once a fertile plain could become a dune field, but what was once a harsh, exposed rock face might, over centuries, accumulate enough sand to support new vegetation. Consider the material legacy. Beyond the structural stones, the debris of a lost city contained a wealth of reusable items. Pottery shards, metal tools, even organic refuse could be integrated into the lives of new inhabitants. You might find a new settlement where ancient pottery forms are still echoed, or where tools are shaped from metals salvaged from the buried past. This is not just recycling. It is a direct line of inheritance, a tangible connection to the lives lived before, showing how ingenuity and practicality drove adaptation. The old dust, then, is not merely inert remains. It is a rich repository of building materials, of water knowledge, of strategic locations, and of spiritual resonance. It provides the very ingredients for new beginnings. You realize that these cycles of abandonment and resettlement are not just isolated incidents, but rather a characteristic rhythm of human existence in challenging environments. The desert, in its vastness and indifference, enforces a particular kind of innovation and resilience. It demands adaptation, rewards careful observation, and punishes complacency. These new communities, rising from the literal and metaphorical ashes of their predecessors, developed unique identities. They carried forward elements of the past, but also forged their own distinct cultures, shaped by the harsh lessons of impermanence and the constant imperative of survival. You hear the echoes of ancient languages in their speech, see the faint lines of ancient designs in their textiles, but you also witness the vibrancy of something new, something forged in the crucible of adaptation. Sometimes, the memory of the buried city itself became a foundational myth for the new inhabitants. Tales of a great city swallowed by the sand, of its mighty rulers or its terrible downfall, would pass from generation to generation. These stories served not only as entertainment, but also as cautionary tales, guides for living, and explanations for the landscape around them. You listen to the whispered legends, understanding how the past, even when hidden, continues to shape the present. The concept of old dust is thus transformed. It is not just the pulverized remains of a forgotten civilization. It is a dynamic substrate, a fertile ground for historical continuity. It is the very earth beneath your feet, layered with the stories of rise and fall, of disappearance and reappearance. You understand that the desert does not simply erase, it reconfigures. It represents. It recycles. And in doing so, it constantly invites new life, new attempts, new dreams to take root. You begin to see the human journey not as a series of isolated events, but as an unbroken chain, albeit one where links might sometimes be buried, only to be reconnected by the diligent work of archaeologists, or more commonly, by the sheer determination of those who continue to live and thrive in the shadow of the past. The people who built these new communities were not necessarily aware they were building on the ruins of greatness. They were simply trying to survive, to prosper, to find water and shelter, just as their distant ancestors had done. This continuity underscores a profound truth. Human civilization is not fragile in the way a single building is fragile. It is a constantly adapting, evolving organism. When one part withers, another sprouts. When one city is lost, another rises, often literally drawing sustenance from the ghost of what came before. The sand may have covered the magnificent architecture, the bustling streets and the vibrant markets of those desert cities, but it could not extinguish the human spirit of invention and survival. You feel this spirit now, a tangible presence in the quiet expanse of the desert. It is in the persistent wind, shaping dunes over buried walls. It is in the hardy plants that find purchase in the shifting sands. And it is in the very idea that from the profound loss of a great city, the seeds for countless new beginnings were sown. The old dust holds not just an ending but a promise. The promise of renewal written time and again across the vast, enduring canvas of the desert. These ruins do not speak only of death, but of life, persistent and unyielding, always finding a way to rise.